Good day, classmates, and hello to everyone. I am Norberto Villanueva, and I am a student of Master in Arts in Development Communication at the UP Open University. As part of the requisites in our subject, DevC 206, which is about radio and print media production, I have drafted a 2-hour radio developmental program in magazine format. The proposed program will air every Sunday from 11 o'clock a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. and is entitled Ang Manggagawang Pinoy. This will cover the various concerns of the Manggagawang Pinoy through labor specialists and authorities from the government, NGOs, civil society groups, and other sectors of the society. And for this particular episode, I have invited no other than the Public Information Officer of the Department of Labor and Employment, Director Nicon F. Fameronag. And for the next few minutes, Director Fameronag will provide us with a better understanding of this particular measure that attempts to address the real concerns of our unsung heroes, our Kasambahays.
My name is Nicon F. I am the Director of the Labor Communications Office, and I am also acting as the spokesperson of the Department of Labor and Employment.
Okay, when did you join DOLE, and what are your other jobs prior to your present position in DOLE?
I joined the Department of Labor and Employment in 2010 at the start of the Aquino administration. Prior to that, I was a public relations media practitioner. I have also been the spokesman of the Department of Labor in 2002 to 2004. I have worked with the Senate of the Philippines for close to 18 years under the office of Senator Blas F. Oble. And as his Chief of Staff at the Commission on Appointments and as his staff in the Senate of the Philippines, I did technical work, media work, and political constituency work for the late Senator and Foreign Affairs Secretary.
Would you know the current status of the Kasambahay Bill?
The Kasambahay Bill, or an act instituting regulatory policies for domestic work and establishing thereby the standards of protection to promote the welfare of domestic workers, has been reconciled by the Senate and the House and is now awaiting signature of the President.
Would you know if DOLE had a hand in the drafting of the Kasambahay Bill?
Of course, yes. The historical genesis of the Kasambahay Bill emanates from the work of the Department of Labor and Employment 16 or 18 years ago, and it culminated in 2011 when the International Labor Organization finally adopted ILO Convention 189, setting the standards for international standards for domestic workers. The Philippines, specifically the Department of Labor and Employment, has a leading hand in its adoption by the ILO. For 2 years sitting as chairman of the Committee on Domestic Work. And when it was finally approved in 2011, the Philippines, through the Senate of the Philippines, ratified it in 2012. And consequent to that, and following the requirements of the convention to enact a national legislation in compliance with the requirements of ILO C-189, the Congress of the Philippines has adopted the Kasambahay Bill as a national law, thereby putting into the ambit of protection millions of Filipino household domestic workers and providing the welfare and protection that should be rightfully theirs as now part of the formal labor economy.
What inspired or what pushed DOLE to support such a measure?
The social protection mandate of the Constitution, principally, and the social protection pillar of the Millennium Development Goals, which the Philippines is currently pursuing with vigor, are the main reason for the DOLE to push for the adoption of this Kasambahay Bill, and also the fact that millions of Filipino workers work abroad, work locally as household service workers, and the Department of Labor and Employment as the labor and employment arm of the national government saw fit to put into the ambit, onto the look of the social protection, in the umbrella of social protection, the millions of household service workers working in the Philippines and working abroad without the benefit of social protection and other social benefits.
Okay. Going now into the substance of the bill, would you tell us the salient features of the Kasambahay Bill?
The salient features of the Domestic Workers Act include 5 main sections. Firstly, Section 5, which is standard treatment, requiring that no domestic helper should be subjected to abuse or to any form of physical violence or harassment or any degrading act. Number 2, the right and privilege of the worker to 3 adequate meals and humane sleeping arrangements, appropriate rest, and assistance in case of illness. Also requiring the employer not to withdraw or hold in abeyance these rights and privileges as a punishment. And number 3, guaranteed privacy at all times in all forms of communications and personal effects. Number 4, access to outside communication during free time and during emergency, even during work time. And the last, education and training opportunity which should be given by the employer to the domestic worker, who may be allowed to attend alternative learning sessions to improve or enhance their skills as workers. The House and the Senate have exhaustively debated on this criticism on the appropriateness of the Kasambahay Bill, of the Domestic Workers Act, and the fact that they have discussed this in debates and in public hearings prove that the criticism is unfounded. The employment of household service workers by households already creates an employer-employer relationship. And regardless of the nature of the employment of household service workers, the Domestic Workers Act now provides them the rights and privileges that belong to formal sector workers. That's why under Section 11 of the proposed law, any household service worker who will work when the law becomes effective should have an employment contract entered between her or him and his employer and employer in a language understood clearly both by the domestic worker and the household service worker must have a copy of this employment contract. The employment contract must contain the duties and responsibilities of the household service worker. There should be a period of employment. There should be a provision for compensation. There should be a provision for authorized deductions of his salary. There should be provisions stipulating the hours of work and the payment for overtime, the rest days and the allowable leaves, board, lodging, and medical attention provisions, agreements on deployment expenses because some domestic helpers are deployed domestically from the provinces to cities where they work. There is a provision on loan agreement. There is a provision on the termination of the employment of a household service worker, and of course other lawful conditions agreed by both parties. So these provisions, we believe, because they were adopted by both the House and the Senate, will redound to the benefit of household service workers when the Kasambahay Bill or the Domestic Workers Act takes effect after its signing by the President of the Republic of the Philippines.
Some say that this bill is disadvantageous to the middle or low-income families who really need to have kasambahays in their households. What's your take about this?
There is a provision in the proposed law for the payment of minimum wage. In Metro Manila, it should be not less than 3,000. And in the provinces, it should not be less than 2,500 pesos per month. But this provision will only apply for a year, after which there will be a review of the wages. And the National Wages and Productivity Commission, which is the wage policy setting arm of the government, and it is an attached agency of the Department of Labor and Employment, is tasked to recommend and study and issue wage orders for household service workers. The fact that household service workers are being provided for under the law with minimum wage is the best example of the protection mandate of the Constitution, that workers should be given protection and a living wage as provided for in the Constitution. After 1 year of the effectivity of the law, the RTWPBs, or the Regional Tripartite Wage and Productivity Boards, there are 16 of these wage boards in the regions, and they are under the policy supervision of the Department of Labor and Employment, will review and adjust the salaries of household service workers as needed. There is also a provision in the proposed law that if, and you call this the non-diminution of benefits, meaning to say if a household service worker is now receiving something like, say, 5,000 pesos, when the law takes effect, that salary will not be reduced to adjust to the minimum wage, and that's the beauty of it, because there are also household service workers who are receiving more than what the proposed law dictates. It has been close to 2 decades when the first Kasambahay Bill was filed in Congress, and after 18 years, finally, Congress has saw it fit to include household service workers in the formal sector, formal labor sector economy. So definitely this is a landmark bill which will protect millions of household service workers and at the same time shield them from abuse, provide them with social benefits, because the proposed law requires that they should have health insurance, social security, leaves, paid leaves, and pag-ibig, healthcare benefits. So definitely this proposed bill will benefit millions of household service workers, not only here in the Philippines, but also those who are working abroad, although this law will apply only in the Philippines. But then again, household service workers under our household service protection package being promoted and being implemented by the Department of Labor and Employment is already in effect in many countries where we are deploying household service workers.
Okay. So,
During the deliberation in the bicameral conference committee, some members of Congress were saying that the household service worker, the Domestic Workers Act, is pro-employer, pro-domestic helper. But the fact that the provision on the rights of the workers are already spelled out in the bill. It is also a fact that the employer of household service worker are accorded the same rights and privileges. For example, they can terminate the household service worker for cause. They have the right to choose their household service worker. Those without skills, they can reject. If they feel that a household service worker is not fit, they can replace him or her. If, for example, the household service worker has an ailment which could affect her work as household service worker, or if she has contagious disease, then the employer has the right to terminate the worker. So, on balance, the Domestic Workers Act contains definitely provisions which are favorable to the household service worker, but the rights of the employers are also very well protected.
So you have mentioned that this bill is now pending in Malacanang for the signature of the President. Would you quantify if this version that's pending for signature, did it retain most of the provisions being pushed by DOLE?
We cannot speculate on whether the office of the President will sign the Domestic Workers Bill in toto or will veto some provisions. But what we can say is the Kasambahay Bill or the Domestic Workers Act was a priority legislative measure as certified by the President. So we are very confident, we are very hopeful that once it is signed into law, the signed version of the measure will retain all the major provisions that have been hammered out or fashioned out by the Congress of the Philippines.
Okay.
As we have publicly announced after the bill was approved in both houses, the Department of Labor and Employment stands ready to cooperate with other national government agencies in implementing the law once it is signed into law. In fact, Secretary of Labor and Employment Rosalinda Dino Pires Pantosos already publicly announced that the DOLE is ready to draft the implementing rules and regulations of the proposed law in cooperation with the Department of Interior and Local Government, which is under the proposed law is mandated to draft the implementing rules and regulations. In all matters relating to employer-employee relationship as provided for in the law, the DOLE regional offices are ready to receive complaints from household service workers against their employers who will violate the provisions of the law. And as to matters relating to disputes, to criminal matters, it is provided for in the proposed law that if the violations are criminal in nature, or related to the violation of revised penal code, it will be the courts who will decide. But on matters of labor and employment, on matters of labor standards, the Department of Labor and Employment, with its inspectorate system, is ready to implement the full provisions of the Domestic Workers Act. Of course, we welcome very happily the enactment by Congress of the proposed measure. And we are very hopeful, and we are also very confident that the President will soon sign the Household Domestic Workers Act into law, because we have been awaiting this law for quite a long time. Household service workers in the country have been awaiting for the enactment of this law for quite a long time. In drafting the proposed versions of the law as approved by the House, we were very cooperative in public hearings and public consultations, together with our tripartite and sectoral partners, non-government organizations, faith-based institutions who were battling for the enactment of this law. And now that it's about to become a law, we are saying that once this law becomes effective, millions of household service workers in the Philippines will be happy to know that even if they are working as household service workers, they will already be entitled to the same social protection and social benefits accorded to other members of the formal labor sector. They will have rest days. They will have continuous rest. They are entitled to social benefits such as a minimum wage. They are entitled to insurance, health, pag-ibig benefits, and they have the right to seek redress for their grievances through the Department of Labor and Employment. And this will help the Philippines attain its Millennium Development Goal of employment and social protection, and will uplift the lives of household service workers and their families. Thank you.